The movie opens with a heavy silence hanging in the air, and a terrified man wanders through a maze of endless yellow corridors. He screams for help at the top of his lungs, but his voice simply echoes into the empty hallways. When a sudden blast shakes the walls, he spins around to investigate the noise. Although the hallway looks completely empty, he feels a growing sense of dread deep inside his chest. He continues to push forward, hoping to find some way out of this nightmare. As he walks deeper into the maze, he notices several bizarre items scattered across the floor. There are loose papers lying on the ground, and a cushion sits nearby with feathers scattered on top of it. When he looks up at the yellow ceiling, he discovers a deeply disturbing dark stain. Before he can process what this means, another sudden noise echoes from the darkness. A strange silhouette suddenly appears out of nowhere, and his heart begins to race with pure terror. He runs as fast as his legs can carry him, and he darts through a series of confusing hallways. When he bursts into a strange room filled with virtual reality gear, he desperately searches for an escape route. He tries to open a sealed door, but the handle refuses to budge. The dark figure catches up to him, and a sudden, violent strike knocks him to the ground. As his camera crashes to the floor, the screen cuts to a completely different scene from the past. In a childhood memory, a young girl named Mary smiled as her mother helped her press her handprint into fresh wet cement. This small moment represented a brief window of peace, but her circumstances quickly changed as the years went by. Now a grown woman, Mary stands on the sidewalk and watches her childhood home get torn down by heavy machinery. Since the building is being demolished, the concrete handprint is the very last piece of her past. Sometime later, a stressed man named Clark arrives in office for a therapy session. His therapist is Dr. Mary Klein, and she gently points out that he is living in complete isolation. Although he tries to deny her claim, he eventually admits that he has done some terrible things. He confesses that he has deeply hurt people in his life, and he believes that he deserves to be alone. If he truly wants to change, Mary tells him that he must confront his painful past. To help him face his regrets, Mary suggests that they repeat a familiar role-playing exercise. Clark closes his eyes, and he mentally travels back to the night his wife kicked him out of their home. He remembered arriving home late, and he recalled how quiet the dark house was. As he walked through the kitchen, he accidentally knocked over a glass. The loud shattering sound woke his wife, Barbara, as she immediately came downstairs to see what had happened. Since Clark had been drinking that night, the conversation quickly turned into a massive fight. He tried to apologize for waking her, but the tension between them only grew worse. When he mentioned that he knew she wanted children, Barbara angrily cut him off. She accused him of never understanding her dreams, and he lashed out in a fit of absolute rage. He screamed that he paid for her entire life, including her college tuition and all of her personal outings. As the argument escalated, Clark claimed that she would just abandon him with the kids to chase her own career. He shouted that he was an architect, and he reminded her that he was the only one supporting them. By relieving this awful memory during the therapy session, Clark manages to let go of some of his heavy emotional burdens. Shortly after this session, we see Clark attempting to film a commercial for his struggling furniture store. While he sits down on a display chair, the wooden legs suddenly snap beneath him. He falls flat on his back, and he screams in utter frustration. The reality of his life is incredibly depressing, and his business is completely failing. Nobody ever visits his showroom, and his financial troubles are getting worse by the day. When an electric technician arrives to read the meter, Clark immediately starts arguing with him. He demands a discount on his bill, pointing out that several lights in the shop keep flickering. While they're inspecting the fuse box, they discover two highly unusual switches. They flip the first switch, but absolutely nothing happens in the store. When they try the second switch, the result is exactly the same. They're completely baffled by these horizontal controls, and they cannot understand why they are even installed there. Meanwhile, Mary sits in her quiet apartment and watches a motivational video on her television. The commercial is actually her own advertisement as a therapist, but she can barely bring herself to eat her dinner. As she looks down at her arm, we see a scar that matches the exact shape of her childhood handprint. At the same time, Clark is watching television when his screen suddenly goes pitch black. Since the rest of the building still has electricity, he turns on a few lamps around the showroom. We quickly realize that he is actually sleeping inside his furniture store, having been kicked out of his home with nowhere else to go. When the lights begin to flicker aggressively, Clark decides to go for a drive to clear his head. As he travels through the dark streets, he listens to one of Mary's self-help podcasts. Without even realizing where he is going, He ends up parking right in front of his old house. He stares at the building from his car, wishing he could return to the life he lost. The next morning, he sits in his quiet shop and tries to distract himself by drawing on a piece of paper. While Clark is drawing, Mary looks out her window and watches a young girl standing next to her mother. Later that afternoon, Clark turns on his television and witnesses something incredibly bizarre. The screen does not show a normal broadcast. It displays a live image of the wires inside his fuse box. After a few seconds, the television screen shuts off entirely. A single light bulb turns on in a dark corner of the store, and Clark walks over to investigate. Furious with the constant electrical issues, Clark turns off every single breaker one by one. The entire store goes dark, but he quickly notices a strange, glowing line on the wall. Intrigued by this glowing rift, he slowly approaches the wall and reaches out to touch it. The moment his fingers make contact with the light, a powerful force violently sucks him through the wall. He falls hard onto the floor, and he looks up to find himself in a bizarre, yellow-walled room. Although he is completely disoriented, Clark notices that the yellow room is filled with furniture from his own store. He manages to crawl back through the portal, and he stands in his normal showroom once again. Since his curiosity is stronger than his fear, he decides to step back through the glowing rift to explore further. He walks down several endless corridors, and he finds multiple rooms that are completely empty. When he spots a sign that says "Stop," he notices an open doorway right next to it. He steps inside the room, and he discovers a dead, bloody bird lying on the floor. He continues to walk through the massive hallways, finding hundreds of chairs scattered in every single direction. Suddenly, he hears the distant sound of a woman speaking French. When a man's voice joins the conversation, Clark follows the sounds toward a motionless silhouette. As he gets closer, he realizes the figure is just a cardboard cutout connected to a radio. Multiple voices begin playing in different languages, and Clark follows a wire leading to a sealed door. After discovering a small hidden hatch, he opens it and finds an abandoned backpack. He looks inside the bag and finds several ID cards belonging to complete strangers. Even though he is feeling incredibly anxious, he decides to crawl through the narrow tunnel anyway. When he reaches the other side, he enters a room where shoes and sandals are partially sunk into the floor. In the middle of the room sits a single chair, and there is a dark hole in the floor. He looks down the hole and sees a massive pile of chairs stretching far into the depths. Before he can get a closer look, a terrifying noise echoes from the tunnel behind him. He crawls back through the passage and catches a glimpse of a strange figure collapsing in shadows. Terrified by what he saw, Clark runs through a side door and finds himself back at the stop sign. He tries to escape through the glowing wall, but the portal refuses to let him through at first. After trying several more times, he finally breaks through and lands in his normal shop. To prove to himself that the place is real, Clark reaches back through the wall and grabs a wooden stool. He pulls the stool into the real world, and he is finally able to calm his racing mind. What he does not know is that someone is watching his every move through hidden surveillance cameras. A mysterious man named Phil sits in a dark control room, and he quietly monitors Clark's movements on several screens. Later that week, Clark visits Dr. Mary Klein for another therapy session. Mary immediately notices how exhausted he looks, and she asks him what is wrong. Clark explains that he has discovered an impossible, infinite space right behind his shop wall. He describes the endless hallways and the piles of furniture, but Mary is highly skeptical of his story. To her, the story sounds completely made up, and she refuses to believe him even when he shows her a hand-drawn map. Offended by her disbelief, Clark stands up and promises to return with solid proof. He contacts his camera operators, Kat and Bobby, and he asks them to help him document his discovery. The next day, the three of them meet at the furniture store with their gear. Clark explains that they must tie themselves together with safety ropes, and he shows them the exit markers he left behind. Although Kat and Bobby are extremely skeptical, they agree to follow Clark through the glowing wall. The moment they cross over, they are left in complete shock. Bobby points his camera at the endless piles of furniture, and Kat asks who all of these items belong to. Clark admits that he has no idea, but he promises that they will find the answer soon. As they walk deeper into the yellow maze, Clark mentions that he saw a dry swimming pool ahead. When they discover a deep vertical tunnel, they decide that Bobby should go down to investigate. They secure him tightly with a heavy rope, and he slowly lowers himself into the dark hole. Upon reaching the bottom, he finds piles of old, dirty clothes scattered across the floor. He walks into an adjacent room and finds the smashed remains of the cardboard cutout. As he notices a light flickering in the distance, he decides to get a closer look. Suddenly, his rope reaches its absolute limit. When he turns around, He sees a terrifying shadow moving in the darkness. Swept by pure panic, Bobby screams at the others to pull him up. A brutal force suddenly tugs the rope, and Bobby is dragged downward. Before they can let go, Clark and Kat are violently dragged into the deep hole as well. They crash heavily to the bottom, and they watch in horror as a strange creature drags Bobby's bleeding body away. Kat runs desperately after her boyfriend, and Clark tries his best to follow her. Since the hallways are incredibly confusing, Clark quickly gets separated and lost in a maze. He runs frantically through the yellow corridors, hoping to find some way out. Eventually, Clark stumbles into a bizarre room decorated with a Christmas tree and a solitary statue. Out of nowhere, a strange creature with a feminine appearance lunges at him. Terrified to his core, Clark flees without looking back until he reaches the empty swimming pool. He hears Kat's voice screaming for help, and he drops his camera to run toward her. While he is searching the area, an unknown hand reaches down and picks up the drop camera. As the footage cuts off, we're taken back to a memory from Mary's childhood. A young Mary approaches her bedroom window as she pulls back the old newspapers covering the glass. Her mother suddenly grabbed her, and she warned Mary that the outside world was filled with evil people. Since her mother was so paranoid, Mary lived her early life locked away from the world. Suddenly, a massive explosion shook the house, and the memory faded away. In the present day, Mary remembers this traumatic event while staring at her concrete handprint. Her phone suddenly rings, and Clark's distorted voice speaks to her from the other end. He tells her that he has found the way, that he warns her that he is never coming back. Deeply concerned for his safety, Mary leaves her apartment and drives to the furniture shop. When she arrives, she finds the store closed and covered in official warning signs. Since the front door is slightly ajar, Mary sneaks inside and makes her way to the basement. She finds Clark's notes and maps scattered on the floor as she notices the glowing rift on the wall. Realizing that his wild stories were true, Mary takes a deep breath and steps through the portal. When she reaches the other side, she discovers that all the furniture has completely vanished. She walks through the empty, echoing spaces, calling out Clark's name. As she walks deeper into the maze, the strange voices from earlier begin to whisper again. She finds a bizarre drawing on the wall as she realizes it features a quote from her own commercial. Suddenly, Clark's voice speaks from behind her, and she spins around in shock. He is standing there with a creepy, serene expression on his face. Mary asks him where they are, and he calmly explains that this place contains every space that could ever exist. When a loud noise startles her, Clark tells her to calm down and promises that everything is fine. He steps behind her, and he suddenly chokes her until she loses consciousness. While she is asleep, we see another memory of her childhood. After the house exploded, her mother was locked away in a psychiatric facility. Left completely alone in the world, Mary developed deep emotional scars that she still carries. When Mary finally wakes up, she finds herself tied to a chair in a bizarre room. Clark is calmly preparing a dinner, and he places plates on a table as if everything were normal. There are several motionless figures sitting around the table, including the strange feminine creature. Clark explains that this place slowly consumes people, and he says they eventually turn into empty shells of their former selves. According to him, these spaces are built out of broken memories and forgotten lives. To prove his point, Clark grabs a knife and violently stabs one of the quiet figures. The figure does not react at all, and Clark explains that they no longer feel any pain or emotion. He cuts open the figure's chest, and he pulls out a strange material that looks like white cotton. He puts the cotton on a plate, and he tells Mary that they can even eat it. He then opens a nearby refrigerator, and Mary screams when she sees the severed head of her former assistant. Horrified by what she is seeing, Mary tries to stay calm and begs him to untie her. Clark refuses, and he turns off the lights to begin another role-playing game. He forces Mary to act like his ex-wife Barbara, and he begins to scream at her in a fit of absolute rage. He lets out years of built-up frustration, but Mary refuses to play along any longer. She confronts him with the harsh truth, as she tells him that his wife left him because of his own toxic behavior. She explains that he always blames others for his failures, as she tells him that he refuses to take responsibility for his actions. Her words strike Clark deeply, and he looks genuinely hurt by the truth. He admits that he wants to change, and Mary gently suggests that he should start by letting her go. Clark falls silent for a moment, and he slowly approaches her to untie the ropes. Before they can escape, the motionless feminine creature suddenly panics and begins running around the room. The terrifying monster from the drawing suddenly appears, and Clark acts as if nothing unusual is happening. He calmly introduces Mary to the creature, but the beast does not care about his introductions. In one swift movement, the monster grabs Clark and bites him savagely. As Clark bleeds out on the floor, Mary takes advantage of the chaos and runs for her life. She bursts through a door and finds herself on a simulated street, but she is still trapped inside the endless backrooms. Since the monster is still chasing her, she runs through countless rooms filled with old lamps and dusty furniture. She trips and falls hard, as she injures her leg in the process. Despite the intense pain, she forces herself to stand up and keep moving. When she reaches a massive, dark abyss, she is forced to climb up the steep walls to escape. After a difficult climb, Mary manages to get away from the creature. She reaches the top of the abyss, and she finds herself standing in a perfect duplicate of Clark's furniture store. Although the layout looks familiar, the actual furniture is completely different. She runs to the front door and tries to open it, but the lock is sealed tight. Realizing she is completely trapped, Mary feels a wave of absolute despair wash over her. The monster suddenly catches up to her, and she notices that it now looks like a grotesque pirate. In a desperate bid for survival, she grabs a coat stand and smashes the creature's leg to pieces. The entire building begins to shake, and a thick gas from the fire extinguishers fills the air. As the gas begins to weaken her, Mary uses a small stone from her past to strike the monster in the face. The impact dazes the beast as she runs down a long corridor. Just when she thinks she has found an exit, several people in hazmat suits tackle her to the ground. They use a special gas to knock her out, and they express absolute shock that she survived. Mary is taken to a secret research facility, and she undergoes multiple medical scans. As they wheel her down a hallway, she catches a glimpse of the dead monster's body. Sometime later, she is taken to an interrogation room. The mysterious man named Phil enters the room, and he asks her how she managed to enter the backrooms. Mary explains the portal in the basement, and she demands to know what they're going to do with her. Phil reveals that his organization discovered this dimension by accident, and they have spent years trying to map its endless hallways. He admits that they still do not understand how it works, but they know that more portals are opening all over the world. Before she can ask any more questions, Mary's mind begins to heavily dissociate. Her oldest memories return to her, and she sees flashes of her childhood home and her mother. We realize that the backrooms preserve the memories of those who enter, and her lost belongings are now scattered throughout the yellow maze. Far away in the endless corridors, a hollow replica of Mary stands completely still. Backrooms 2026 movie recap ends with Mary becoming an empty being, and finally, she is trapped in the yellow walls forever.